move the time up. So, all right, let's get in because today was a big day for housing data. Today was the big day of the month. We got the gold standard report. That is the Case-Shiller index, the S&P CoreLogic Case-Shiller index. There's actually some other parts of that I just chose not to mention because it gets a little, I can't say it all in one breath. So it's a big name, but the Case-Shiller index, as it is well known, is the gold standard when it comes to looking at housing prices. And it showed what I think we all knew it was going to show, and that was that the housing market once again is heating back up. So if you remember, the Case-Shiller index lags. It's about 3 months behind. So it's February. We're just getting December data, and it's showing that things started to uptick in December, which we were talking about here on the program. You know, there was data out there from, say, Altos Research, does a great job, week-to-week data, showing that all of a sudden inventory levels were dropping. And now everyone assumed that, okay, well, it's December, so housing inventory is always low. There's not a lot of volume in December. Everyone's, kind of getting over Thanksgiving. They're preparing for Christmas. They're, planning trips, going to visit family. They're getting ready for the new year, and no one's really buying homes. So, okay, inventory levels are low. We'll expect that. But then we know in January, they remained low. We didn't see an increase. And we went, okay, something's going on. And that was the housing market, which we expected was going to be cooling off, is not cooling off. And so that's what we saw in the report that came out today. And what's interesting is that economists had projected that there was going to be a slight decrease, and there was not. So the U.S. National Home Price Index held at 18.8% year-over-year growth, while the 10-city and 20-city composites saw a slight uptick. So the 10-city composite was up 0.1% to 17%, and the 20-city composite was up 0.3% to 18.6. And that's important because the economists were projecting the 20-city composite was going to fall from 18.3 to 18%. So that's 0.6% miss, which doesn't seem like a big deal. But and I'm not blaming the economists going, oh, look at these dumb economists. I'm just pointing out that is how big this swing was in December. I mean, we're supposed to see a drop. We don't see a drop. We actually see a uptick. Now, month over month, the national index was up almost 1%, 0.9%. 10 city was up a full percent, and the 20 city composite, this explains it, was up 1.1% month over month. And just so you know, this is the highest calendar year increase in the 34 years of data, and was substantially ahead of the hot housing market in 2020, which only saw 10.4% year over year gains. And a lot of that you have to assume, because the end of 2020 was just crazy hot. It was the beginning of the year. Everything was pretty normal, a good housing market, the start of the year. Then COVID hit. Everyone thinks the housing market's going to collapse. No one's buying homes in March, not a lot. And then when rates dropped and the Fed did what it did, and so all of a sudden, boom, people are buying homes, and the housing market took off, and it hasn't really looked back. We saw a little bit of a dip, but now here we are once again on the rise. And of course, you've seen this name before. Phoenix, Arizona continues to lead all housing markets. This number is just so crazy. 32.5% year-over-year growth. 32.5%. Number two, actually, interestingly enough, number 2 and 3 are both Florida cities. Tampa and Miami. Tampa was up 29.4%, and Miami was number 3, up 27.3%. Craig Lazara, managing director at S&P DGI, noted that the slight deceleration we recently saw has ended. It's over. We're back on the rise again. Saying, quote, "We have noted that for the past several months, home prices have been rising at a very high but decelerating rate. That deceleration paused in December as year-over-year changes in all 3 composite indices were slightly ahead of their November levels. December's 18.8% gain for the national composite is the 5th highest reading in history. And of course, all those readings, I think, happening this year, maybe one or two in 2020, but I think most of them were in 2021. And here's the thing. It's not just Case-Shiller, because as we all know, Case-Shiller is released. That gets a lot of attention. But also what comes out exactly the exact same time, 9 a.m., was the Federal Housing Finance Agency's home price index. That comes out at the exact same time. And it also showed an uptick to end the year. They have home price appreciation a little lower at 17.5%, but it was up in comparison to the previous quarter. So this is the quarterly data looking at the fourth quarter of 2021. Like I said, home prices up 17.5% year over year, but quarter over quarter, a 3.3% increase to end, like I said, 2021. So what it's showing is that dip that everyone was expecting didn't happen. Or that when we saw it, it went right back up. It wasn't a continuous decline. As we all know, housing prices are now moving back up once again. Home prices were up in all 50 states, with Arizona leading the pack. I'm assuming Arizona or Phoenix is probably playing a large part in this. Arizona was up the entire state 27.4% year over year. Utah was number 2, up 27.1%, and Idaho, followed by Idaho, Florida, and Tennessee, rounding out the top 5. And just so you know, Idaho was up 27%, Florida 25.6%, and Tennessee was up 24.1%. And here's an interesting note. Washington, D.C., I know it's not a state. They want to become one. It's not going to happen. At least I don't think it's going to happen. As someone who used to live there, I hope it doesn't happen. D.C. saw the smallest price appreciation, up just 6.6%. Can you imagine that? The worst year of all the states, still up 6.6%. And I'll tell you the reason why that is. If you go back and look at the data from 2008, when housing markets across the country were seeing, in some cases, maybe double-digit dips, D.C. did not see a big drop with regards to home prices because of how much government money flows into that area. I think it's like $10 flow in for every $1 that goes out. It's nuts. And when the economy hit the skids, what happened? Government started spending. And a lot of that money stayed in the DC area, as it always does. And so they never saw a huge drop in prices. So that's why you're not seeing, because homes cannot go up really anymore in DC. I mean, if you were to chart this, I can only imagine they're probably over a timeline from 2008 are pretty close to where everything else is, if not above that. And so that's why you're just seeing slower appreciation there, because they never saw a big dip like other markets did. In case you're wondering about regions, the mountain region led all regions with 23.1% year over year appreciation, followed by the South Atlantic was number 2, up 20%. And the Pacific was number 3, up 19.4. So we kind of knew it was going to happen. And that was home prices are back up. The question is, this is the big question. What are these rate hikes? Not from the Fed. I'm talking about what's happening in the mortgage industry already when you're looking at mortgage rates at 4%. The last report we got, I think the mortgage bankers had them above 4%. Freddie Mac was right around 4. That was a week ago, and rates, they fluctuate every single day, but for the most part, they seem to be above 4% and then some. And so what impact is that going to have on the housing market? Because the one thing that's fascinating about what's happening right now is that rents that we've talked about are also skyrocketing. And so people are going, oh my gosh, home prices are skyrocketing. There's a bubble. There's going to be a crash. Oh my gosh. And this is sort of the argument that I make when people talk about the US dollar and they say, we're printing all this money. And obviously this is one of the reasons why we have inflation. But everyone says, oh my gosh, the dollar is going to lose so much value. Everyone's going to flee the United States. And my answer always is, not that I like the printing of money, but my answer always is, well, where are they going to go? Everyone is printing money worse than we are. And so when you look at the housing market, you don't look at it in a vacuum. It's not happening independent of everything else. And so, sure, home prices are going up. rates are going up. But if rents are also going up and they are going up more, it still makes sense to buy. And so that's why, even though rates are reaching that 4% number, which, trust me, a year ago, if you would have asked anyone what would happen if rates hit 4%, they would say, oh, the market would collapse. I mean, to be honest with you, I think I saw that prediction like 6 months ago. And what's happened? It hasn't collapsed. Sure, maybe demand has dropped a little bit, but there's still bidding wars. There's still high demand. There's still no inventory. And the number one reason, because the alternative is scaring a lot of people of what's happening in the rental markets. Now, that's why something at some point is going to have to give. It's going to have to, because you're reaching the point where rents are unaffordable and homes are unaffordable. And so who's going to be the first to kind of slow down? And more than likely, my somewhat educated, but I'm not an economist, my prediction would be home prices. You're going to start seeing home prices start to slow more so than rents, because home prices have been skyrocketing for almost, 2 years? Rents took a big dip in 2020, didn't really turn around until 2021. So because housing, purchases were ahead, it makes more sense that rents still have some room to grow versus, say, home prices. But with everything that's happening with the Fed and everything else, it's very difficult to predict, as we have noticed many a times here on the pod.